10th, the state's emergency shelter crisis is our focus this morning. Let's go on the record. The number of migrants arriving here in Massachusetts now clashing with funding to care for them as Beacon Hill moves to control spending. The need is only growing. Can solutions be found? It's time to go on the record.
From WCVB Channel 5, the inside word from Washington to Beacon Hill. Today's newsmakers are going on the record.
Welcome to OTR, everyone. I'm Ed Harding, as you can see, alongside News Center 5's political reporter Sharman Zachetti. This morning, we are topic-based this morning on OTR, and that topic is the state's emergency shelter crisis and homelessness. Our guests, plural, this morning are David Shapiro, who, by the way, is related to Mark Shapiro. The baseball man.
Yes.
You're his brother.
Mark's little brother. That's
Mark's
one
little
of my
brother.
favorite titles.
Wonderful. Yes. It's great to see you.
Thank you.
CEO of the YMCA of Greater Boston, and Danielle Ferrier, did I pronounce it correctly?
You did. Yes.
Very good. Thank you for joining us, the CEO of Heading Home, an organization dedicated to ending homelessness. It's great to have you with us. And again, this is a topic-oriented presentation this morning because this topic is front and center.
It certainly is. The House has passed legislation, in fact, to limit the length of stay for people in emergency shelters to 9 months, a few more months under certain circumstances. Now, you both are on the front lines of this crisis. Do you think this makes sense? Danielle, let's start with you.
I mean, I think that the policy that came out as part of the supplemental budget, there are really great parts that focus on job readiness, job training, support from employers. And so I think leaning in there and helping ensure we're working with families to get work visas and work permits is a great direction for us to move. It is needed.
But in terms of limiting the length of stay, does that make sense to you? Does that work?
I think that there's a balance that we see the administration, the legislature trying to figure out here in a complex situation, trying to assess how do we ensure that we're housing all of the people who need housing and how we're working to make sure that folks are leaving shelter and getting housed.
And of course, it's compounded by the fact that there are families, moms and dads and families that have school-aged children.
Yeah, I mean, we actually do right by the children pretty well in terms of being able, like at the Y, to get them into early education, to get them into out of school time, to get them into the public school system. We're able to more seamlessly serve young people. It's a lot, the housing and workforce permitting that are two of the most stubborn things. And I think to Danielle's point, like, we have to look at this as transitional. But it's only as transitional as we have affordable housing stock and other problems that intersect with this.
Well, but as Sharman points out, where's the cap? You know what I mean? Can you put a cap on it? Can you put 6 months, 9 months, a year? Can you put a cap on it?
I don't think we have a choice at this point. You know, we have to ensure we have 775 people on a wait list as of yesterday. And to me, the right to shelter law is a child welfare law. We can't have children sleeping on the street. So I think there are very hard decisions being made about caps in terms of numbers and caps in terms of length of stay.
Well, we do see those images of people sleeping at Logan Airport. We have seen that. And so are you concerned that after 9 months, after 12 months, you know, that could happen again? That where are people going to go after that?
Absolutely. We are definitely concerned about that. And I think our goal is to work with the administration to ensure that we create policy and a system that makes sure that that doesn't happen.
So, but you hit it. You just said a key point in administration. Which administration? The Biden administration? The Healy administration?
I mean, I think it's both. This is what's complex about this. You have a federal system that is not doing us any favors right now. And it's certainly not doing newcomers to America any favor in terms of how you get through that system. And then you've got the state, like so many things, trying to figure out what to do with its level of funding and people showing up. And the fact that I think we should be proud as a Commonwealth that we have a child welfare law that says no one sleeps on our streets. But that means we have to find solutions. And at the end of the day, I think both of our organizations and a lot of other nonprofits, we're incredibly lucky to have a state with an incredibly strong nonprofit sector that we become solutions providers at the end of the day.
I wonder, Danielle, what's your read on a federal-state collaboration?
To me, we need the federal-state collaboration without question. To me, the pressure point here is we have federal immigration law colliding with a state regulation and a right to shelter and a Commonwealth committed to make sure that our children do not sleep on the street. And we do need partnership from the government, I think in multiple areas. You know, I think the governor has done a tremendous job of consistently pushing for, expedited work permits, which is absolutely critical for folks to move out of shelter, right? They have to have employment to move out of shelter. And so so that is the right direction and the right focus, while we simultaneously work to support just the sheer number of people who need housing and shelter support right now.
Now, Republicans have been very critical of the House bill. They say this is completely inadequate. They say with tax collections continuing to drop, the state just can't afford this. They also say it's likely that people in emergency shelters now, after they complete their length of stay, that they're just going to be moved to other state-subsidized housing options. Do you see that?
I mean, I think there's two things there. One, it is very easy to come in with criticism of something which is an urgent problem that needs both emergency solutions and patient solutions. So a lot of criticism. We don't want people here. We don't want people there. We want them to be invisible. We want them to move from here to there.
But it's a lot of money. This is a $1 billion problem.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, but it's money that we're spending on people who were here, on newcomers to here. This is our emergency and transitional system, and we have to keep figuring out the balance of compassion, also economic. We need, if you look at our unemployment rate in Massachusetts, we need these folks in our economy. This is how we grow our economy as well. So I think, we need to be solutions providers in my mind.
Danielle, I wonder about the housing crisis. You know, it's your job essentially to help families find homes. How difficult is that right now?
So it's very difficult. As an agency, Heading Home actually works both in shelter and in deeply affordable housing. So we're working across the system to move folks out of shelter into housing. There aren't enough units. We are all well aware of that. I think folks have been talking about that. I think the governor's put forth solutions to try to move forward building, right, and creation of more housing stock. At the same time, we still need to figure out how to house folks and move them out. This, there is no silver bullet answer. This is a very complex issue that has become more complex.
Well, and it's multi-layered too, isn't it? I mean, for example, you have the migrants that are coming into the state, but you also have homeless people in the state that need a place.
Absolutely.
So you have people in state and people coming to the state that need a place.
And I think even another layer is, and I know you all have covered this week, the situation in Haiti has only gotten worse,
right,
which is something we rarely actually talk about, which is why are these people here? These are people who are fleeing a terribly violent situation with their children to try to get to safety and a new life, which people have done forever.
Boston is a destination point for Haitians.
We have the largest diaspora other than Miami and New York City, and it's one of the richness of the city as well. And for us at the Y, we've been doing this for 173 years. We've been basically a gateway, a front door for newcomers to Boston. So it just continues in that tradition. It doesn't make the problems any less complex, but this is, I think, who we want to be as a city and a state.
Right, Danielle?
Agree. The country has always had immigrants. We're founded on immigrants who move here from other countries, right? I think the pressure point is that Massachusetts has never seen the sheer number of families coming at once, right? And needing help with housing.
We're not a border state, so we don't see that.
That's
typically.
Right. That is right. So it's a different,
right?
That's right. That's right.
Well, we've been talking politics the last couple of points here, and let's talk about the right to shelter law. Do you guys think that the right to shelter law, to include a residency requirement, would be workable? Do you think so, Danielle?
I think that's a hard question, honestly. I think it is hard to think that we would leave a child out on the street for 6 months regardless of residency. And so I think that is a very hard one for many of us to sit with. If, I last winter walked through one of our other large cities in the U.S., a northern city, and I saw a 2-year-old sleeping out on a sidewalk.
A 2-year-old?
A 2-year-old. And the cognitive dissonance that created for me, it's an image that sticks, right? That we aren't designed to think a 2-year-old should sleep out on the street. So that is the hard part of thinking about a residency law, right? What does that mean for however many months until you're eligible?
They're saying the Republican argument is that the state's right to shelter law makes the state more attractive to people coming here and to non-government organizations that are sending them here. But so far, it appears nobody on Beacon Hill really is looking to change that particular law. Do you think, having spoken with families and having spoken with service providers, do you think that this law does make the state more attractive than, say, other states?
I think a couple things. I think one, there's a certain level of where you have pockets of people from certain countries, people are going to come because they have family and comfort. There's also a certain point at which people are fleeing emergency situations. I think this notion that they're shopping for states is a little bit of a misnomer. It is right, though, that the places that will treat them the best most folks will end up coming to. And to me, while I know it sets up a practical issue, it should be a point of pride for the Commonwealth as well that people want to make new lives here. We just have to figure this out.
That's one way to look at it, though.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it.
You know, our state is known for taking the lead on hard topics and hard issues, right? We've done this with education, we've done this with homeless young adults, and we step forward and take the lead. And I do believe that is what the Commonwealth, when we put in the right to shelter law, did, and we need to continue to do.